Thank you for joining us on Miracles Are My Normal. Your host, Colleen Lowe, is a successful realtor, entrepreneur, and motivational speaker. On Miracles Are My Normal, we interview entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries, creatives, big thinkers, and those helping shape our future, all who are leading epic lives. They share insights into building their successful businesses, developing a growth mindset, creating a vision for your life, starting with the end in mind, and overcoming obstacles and challenges. Our mission is to share tips, tools, and secrets to assist our followers with gaining the insights and perspective to building their own success stories and living epic lives filled with appreciation, joy, and miracles. Let's make this happen together. And now, your host, Colleen Lowe.
Hi guys, thanks for joining us. My name's Colleen Lowe and I'm with Keller Williams Pacific Estates, and you are on the Miracles Are My Normal podcast, and I am beyond excited to have Paul Morris as my guest. Thanks for joining us today, Paul.
Thank you very much for coming over here and giving me the opportunity to talk to you and your and the people who are following this, which no doubt will blossom into many, 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 many more viewers.
Yeah, we're excited. This is our third podcast, and I met Paul a long time ago. I don't really know Paul. I know who Paul is. I actually have pictures of me and Paul together because I've gotten awards from you before. And let me kind of tell you about Paul. Paul is you're my regional director for Keller Williams, right?
Correct.
And then you have Central California, Southern California. You have 700 properties that you own, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. And I know that the thing that really impressed me about Paul is, one, he has a really good heart. And then the other thing is he wrote a book called Wealth Can't Wait. And the reason I wanted to interview you is because while my son had cancer in the hospital last year, I was trying to process that in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to figure out how to do that. And when I was sitting and meditating at the hospital, I was trying to figure out what I could be grateful for when I just found out my son was probably going to die. And I saw a big donor's name on the door where my son's hospital bed was. And I thought, oh, the donors at the hospital who have impacted me, I'm going to research them and thank them for what they've done for us. And it made me think about wealth. Mm-hmm. And I remembered, how long ago did you write your book?
It was released just over a year ago.
So perfect timing.
But it was a long time in the writing for sure.
Why did you decide to write a book about wealth?
It was a contribution that I felt that I could make to real estate agents, because we work with great salespeople. Our company has great training for salespeople, and great training for salespeople is really about teaching them skills to run their agent business like a real business, and to do more business and to make more money. And I found that when people were earning more and more money, they weren't necessarily building wealth.
Yeah.
So that was something that I felt that I could bring that was a unique value to our agents.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Were you a real estate agent before, or how did you get to be into this real estate and Keller Williams family?
So I was not a real estate agent. I was a lawyer. Mm-hmm. I was exposed to real estate investing at a very young age, and it was something that always struck me as a way to be able to build great wealth that any of us can do. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of it long before. So I always had an interest in real estate and started investing early on. And then when I was practicing law and realizing, this is probably not what I want to be doing for the rest of my life, I met someone who introduced me to Keller Williams. And at that time there were 12,000 realtors in the whole company. And right now in our region there are 10,555 realtors.
Just in our region?
Just in our region, but who's counting?
Yeah, you should be.
Right,
yeah.
I am counting.
You know, it's interesting. My mom was an attorney, and I knew for sure I didn't ever want to be an attorney because she had a horrible lifestyle. She was a wonderful mom and everything,
sure.
but she worked she was a slave to being a lawyer because she always had deadlines to be in court.
Sure.
And she had so many billable hours she had to do all the time. And so you decided that wasn't maybe the best life for you yourself?
That's correct. The first thing that I did was, I came from a blue-collar family. So, and we had a lot of contact with professionals because my dad was in the parking garage business and actually located in a medical center. So we saw lots and lots of doctors. And that was a giant step up for us, right? He didn't have a college education. He grew up during the Depression. And to have a great education and to step up from being blue collar to a much higher status, also ability to give back more and to earn more, right? And that. There was just no doubt that I was going to go to school and be a professional. And I have siblings who are doctors. But that's one of the points that you and I had the opportunity to talk about, and that's the difference between vertical and horizontal income.
Yeah, can you explain that? I just finished reading your book last night, actually.
Wow.
And
you're right under the deadline.
I know, I gave myself till last night. I made it, right? And it's so funny is one of the things that I love is that I used to be a teacher before I sold real estate. And I feel like before we don't teach people about the difference between vertical and horizontal income.
Yes.
And why is that important? And why do the people who are joining us today need to know the difference between that? Can you explain that to them?
Sure. So it's really the difference between passive and active income. And you can be an extremely well-paid professional. So you could be a doctor, a lawyer that makes lots and lots of money. But if you're being paid by the hour, then if you take a day off of work, right? So it's the best compensated lawyer would make a lot of money, and the best compensated doctor would make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And basketball player or you name it, they make a lot of money. And as soon as they take a day off, what do you earn?
Zip.
And what do you earn if you take a year off? Or what happens if you're an athlete and you injure yourself or you age out of it? And so being reliant on the hours in the day, you're trading time for money. That's just the way it is. And it doesn't matter whether you're a blue-collar worker like my dad was, or if you're a fancy professional, you are trading time for money. And so in building passive income, then your money is working for you.
Yeah, and I had never actually thought too much about it until Carter got cancer, and we were sitting at the hospital and we weren't working, right? And I was thinking, wow, if we had rental property or some other passive income stream that was paying us, we could be sitting here and not have to worry about how far down does my savings dwindle,
yes,
right?
Correct.
And I don't think that people think about that, what can they do to replace their income at some level to where they could live on their passive income.
Sure.
And I know that you've done that.
Yes.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we talk about in terms of being a 100%er. And a 100%er is really being able to cover your lifestyle needs with passive income. I like to look beyond that. There's a funny term that I use, concept to think about, and that's defying economic gravity. And that sounds very fancy.
Like
Maybe that is fancy.
Tell us about it. No, we want to hear it.
And defying economic gravity is when you reach that point that your passive income just takes care of everything. So paying for your lifestyle, to me, is an amazing giant fabulous step, but it strikes.
It's a benchmark.
Yeah, it strikes me as a little hollow because there's a lot more that I want than just the lifestyle. So I want to save, I want to reinvest, I want to create, I want to contribute. And so it's when passive income earns enough to do all of that, then that's defying economic gravity. And that just means that you can do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it.
I call that freedom, choices, and options.
Yes.
Right?
I love
Defying economic gravity. I love it.
Defying economic gravity.
I'm going to put that in my journal tonight.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's interesting is I think that people don't realize and think about what is the contribution I want to make to society? What's the legacy I want to leave? And what do I want freedom, choice, and options to do, right?
Yes, correct.
And so for someone who's listening who doesn't even have their basics covered, like what is the first step to getting their first, second, or third investment property? What would you recommend?
That's a great question, and I'm going to answer that.
Okay.
But I want to dial back just a little bit, because one
good.
of the things that I love to do is, when somebody introduces a concept, so defying economic gravity, that may not resonate with some of your folks, but for those who it does resonate with, then it's like, okay, well, that's cool. Now what, right?
Yeah, now what? How do you do it?
So, and I like your next question, which is really a more basic first step, and I think that's very important. But when you're like, hey, defying economic gravity, wow, that sounds cool. To achieve that, I think the next thing to do is to figure out exactly what it would take. So what would it take for me to defy economic gravity? What is the amount of money that would need to be invested? What is just
back
to sort of,
out.
Back it out, right? Start with the end in mind. And that could be just a 15-minute exercise. And even if you're at the place, which most folks are, that they haven't even taken step one. Yeah. It's not a wasted 15 minutes to have that very seemingly very distant goal where you go, hey, defying economic gravity, that's super cool. I have to take step one first, so we'll talk about that. Yeah. But how would we even do that? So what does that look like?
I think actually that's the most important thing that people should do first, because when you get a big picture of what you want and it's limitless possibilities. Yes. If someone takes the time to do that, and they get excited and passionate about that, right? Then you can work it down. You can not just work down the 15 minutes, but you can work it back down to your first project.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And I think that it would be better if more people were thinking bigger. And dreaming bigger, because I was thinking that the reason I would want to do this and build wealth is so I could only help the people at Chalk Hospital. And I happened to talk to Ryan Seacrest from Ryan Seacrest Studios when I was thanking him, and I told him I was going to start this podcast and build wealth so I could donate back like he has, right? I
love it.
And he said, "Why are you thinking so small?" He says, "Why are you just doing Chalk Hospital? Why don't you do Why don't you do a lot of hospitals?"
Well, we'll have to get Ryan Seacrest to join you for a subsequent podcast.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, I already asked him.
Oh, there you go. See?
Yeah.
I love it. And that's the thing, just in that, right?
Yeah.
It's just like,
bigger.
You
bigger.
You are you're a standout, right? So, one of the things that you did when you came today was you brought a gift that was meaningful. That was meaningful to me and meaningful to you, and related it back to a piece of the book, and so amazing when you were at a point in time where had to have been at least a lifetime low, when you were in the hospital and contemplating your son not recovering. You're like, what could I be grateful for? And that sort of attitude opens up so many doors and creates so much possibility. So you're and for Ryan Seacrest to do that, right? So what will we do? How will we have a plan? You say, hey, send him a note. You're like, hey, Ryan, you said think bigger. So, right? Here's what I'll do. I'll come wherever. I'll do, we'll do my podcast is normally an hour. We'll do, 7 minutes. I'll catch you anywhere. I'll do it in the car. I'll ride somewhere with you.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
And in coming from contribution, it creates that. And by the way, at the end of all of that, and I don't mean singling him out for sure, but at the end of all that, it just might not happen, and that's okay.
And it is okay.
Absolutely.
The cool thing is when you brought up my son's cancer and how I processed it, and the day they told us like he had cancer everywhere, like it shook my world. In front of Carter, I acted like everything's fine, right? And then I freaked out on the way home, and then at home I was crying and praying, and I was meditating and doing my yoga breathing, because I used to do a lot of yoga, and I was trying to get, just some clarity. And the thought came to me, do you believe all this stuff on appreciation and contribution and mindset or not? Are you in or out? That was the thought that came to me. Wow. I'm like, oh yeah, I do believe all this stuff I say I believe. And that's when I'm like, okay, I got to figure out, even if my kid dies, what can I appreciate about this whole thing? Yeah, and it is, I do believe that we can take moments like that. Like if Carter had never had cancer, my life was fine and I would have just kept living a mediocre life. I mean, I had a good life, but mediocre in comparison to what my goals and dreams were, you know?
Yeah.
Literally, I think that mindset is everything. And you talk about that in the book. How important do you think mindset is in accomplishing great, passionate things like accumulating 700 properties? Do you think have you spent any time in your life working on your mindset?
Absolutely. And mindset is something that, so maybe just 15 years ago, I would have thought 15 years might be a long time for people, but, I'm 53. So if you say 13 years ago, I was 40 years old. And if you ask me at 40 years old, how big a role does mindset play in success? I'd say, I would know that the correct cool answer was it plays a big part, but I'd be like, you really, like, here's what creates success. Like, I don't know when they launched The Secret, but I was always a secret, cynic, right?
Yeah.
And then, and also my brain's so ADD that I pull all these like crazy things from different places that aren't related. But Mo Anderson, who's on the board of directors of Keller Williams and has taught me a lot. She's our former CEO. She was giving a talk on something totally unrelated to The Secret. And I'm sitting there and she said, there's a Quaker saying, and that is, pray, but move your feet. And when she said that, my crazy ADD brain, I was like, wait a minute. Okay, now I get the secret, because here's the secret. The secret is, and my cynical part was like, okay, well, I'll just sit on the couch, right? And I'll manifest all this greatness. How's that going to work for you? But then the pray, but move your feet. I'm like, okay, I get it. It's the secret plus move your feet. And that's what allowed me to open my eyes to mindset. Now, as I've gotten further and further into it, I realized that like actually, sitting on the couch and manifesting this greatness, if I actually took the time to do that, when I was cynic about it, I didn't do that. I was like, oh yeah, you sit on the couch, I'll get out and do it, right? But if I were actually sitting on the couch and manifesting all this greatness while I'm sitting on the couch, I would jump out of the couch, right?
Right.
I wouldn't be able to sit there that long. I'd be like, well, this is great. Let me think about, let me imagine my way into this other amazing thing, and then I'd be like, I gotta get off the couch.
Because it would inspire you.
It would, yeah. So I think The Secret would work anyway, because I think too that The Secret, but move your feet, is that the mindset is the thing that allows you or motivates you to move your feet.
Yeah, inspired action is what I call it.
Yes, and I used to refer to myself. So there's a big piece of the mindset part. Which is, I believe that two of the most powerful words in the English language are I am. And what you put after I am creates your reality, right? And so if you've ever had, I lose things quite a bit. And, it's like, oh, I left my keys, another place, for the 43rd time. And, what I think to myself, like I am like, oh, I'm such a knucklehead, or how could I have done this again, or people use worse terms, right, when they talk to themselves in that way, and it just takes the energy, and it takes the possibility away. As we know, if you say you are to a heaven forbid, like to a child, right? Negative talk is absolute poison. And I think a lot of us realize that. So no matter how misbehaved my daughter might be in a moment, and she's actually, an amazing kid. But no matter how seemingly, acting out or whatever she was doing, I would never say to her, it would never even cross my mind to say to her, you are, right? You are a brat, right? And like that was mild compared to what parents
Yeah.
said in our generation, right?
Oh, heck
Very,
yeah.
very mild. Okay, so I would never say you are a jerk. And again, I like to always infuse it with tools. So how can we work with that? If I really felt the need to say it, you are being a brat.
Yeah,
right?
in the moment, in
Like
this moment.
That to me, on a scale of 1 to 100, how bad is you are a brat? I think to a kid it's really bad. 95 on bad, and you are being a brat. I think that's like a 10. I mean, that's like barely hits the radar for terrible, because it's what you're doing right now.
In that moment. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
you're always like that. It just
Correct.
means in this moment.
And so that's where affirmations, meditation really help with that.
I do think that we need to reprogram ourselves. I think no matter where we come from, what our background is, I think reprogramming ourselves with the affirmations. I journal a lot.
Yes, amazing.
And I write positive affirmations.
Amazing.
And we just talked about, John said, please don't swear, right?
Right.
On the podcast, right? And then language is so important. The universe doesn't
Right.
understand don't. It just hears do, right?
Yes, correct.
And then it's on your reticular activator,
yeah.
and it's like, oh crap, I never swear, but now I got to worry about that.
We had a fun conversation about it. And John didn't say that because he was worried about me swearing, but we were talking about like, hey, well, is there any like rules of the road? Where it's like, well, we don't swear on our podcast. I'm like, I've never even thought of swearing on the podcast. Now I'm worried I'm going to swear on the podcast. And so, it is very funny that what we focus on, right? And this again, it's like, oh, is this airy fairy thing? And I'm always looking for things that help me along down the road. And I was reading sort of, a little bit of like men's health or men's fitness, a little bit of sort of my version of a junk read, and they had an interview with a race car driver, and there were all these sort of it was not a spiritual. It was not a spiritual interview. It's like, oh, what do you drive at home? He's like, a minivan. I'm like, okay, so that's cool. He's a race car driver, drives a minivan home. Like that's cool. There's nothing spiritual in that. And they asked him, what do you do? When you're in, what do you do to avoid big accidents when you're on the racetrack, right? So, here you are, you're facing death, or you're facing injury, or maybe just being out of a race that's very important to you, and there's cars crashing all around. What do you do? Mm-hmm. How do you avoid that? And his answer was so amazingly simple, and I believe spiritual, and I believe great mindset. And he just said, I aim the front of the car to where the crash is not. So he's not like, as soon as you're like, car crash over there, the first thing that happens is your body turns, right? The steering wheel turns, you go toward the crash. So he's like, he sees all this happening. He's like, well, let me see where there isn't a crash. And as soon as he does this, then he's actually, his body and his car, he's moving and manifesting, right, the car to where that opportunity is. So trying to not do something is, not the best approach, right? Because as soon as I'm trying not, like I've been on a lot of podcasts, I never even crossed my mind to swear. I've never, right? But it's an interesting conversation, because as soon as I'm like, well, don't swear, I'm like, right?
Right,
The
I know.
chance of me swearing on the podcast has gone from basically 0 to like 20%. It's still low, but I've now really brought it into possibility.
Right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
What we think about, the reason I journal every day, and I wrote down in my journal every day that Carter was going to be cancer-free and healthy.
Yeah.
And I visualized him outliving his life.
Yes.
And it's so important that I call it, I write what I call my AID every day. I write down my appreciation, then how I intend to feel for the day.
Wow.
And then I delegate to God and my divine team what I want to order into my life. Like I put you on my AID a long time ago that we would be here today on my podcast.
So tell me the AID, and it's
appreciation. And then intention. How do I want to be or feel? I decide in the morning how I'm going to feel all day. Like no matter what happens, this is how I'm going to be.
And
then delegation.
Delegation.
Delegation is, I think, this is what it looks like in my journal. Thanking God and my divine team in advance for ... And then, like I said, Paul Morris will be a guest on my podcast, or something better, because the universe might have something better, right?
So great. It takes, you know what that does? It takes away it takes away disappointment and it removes the obstacle. And you say, Paul Morris or someone better, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you know what? I'm glad you got me, because someone better is just right around the
corner.
You're going to find it. I love it. It's so good. And so that would be a great one. Actually, I didn't have that. So I love having these conversations with amazing people, because, here I am. You're interviewing me so we can learn something, or, and I'm learning for sure. And so if we rewound it, right, and I were giving you advice about the Ryan Seacrest thing, right, I would say my intention is for Ryan Seacrest or someone better to be on the podcast. And then when you chase down Ryan Seacrest, again, not singling him out, but you chase down this person who's a long shot, and they say no, or hey, I'd like to, but I just don't have time, or whatever, and you don't get it done, you're like, okay, and now what? You're not like, oh, I put all this effort into getting Ryan Seacrest, and he said no. So you're like, okay, next.
No attachment to the outcome.
Yes, it's such an amazing thing, and you can have attachment to your intention. You can have attachment to things being amazing, but not an attachment to what that looks like.
Yeah, not being attached to it being exactly how you think it should look.
Yes.
That's the key.
And if you can practice that non-attachment, I believe that you can do away with almost every disappointment.
I totally agree with you. I think you can do away with all of them.
Yeah,
for real.
that's correct.
One day we were at Keller Williams family reunion in February, right?
Yes.
And we were talking to KW Cares. There's a lady there at corporate.
Kathy and I.
Yeah, we were talking.
Amazing.
Yeah, we were talking to her because they wanted us to apply for the grant for Carter, and we were talking to her, and literally I had this feeling something was wrong with Carter, and we needed to leave. And I stopped her mid-sentence, and I said, I would love to chat with you more. I hope it doesn't affect our ability to, apply for the grant, but something's wrong with my son, and we need to leave right now. And she said, no problem. And I just we left, and we drove to the hospital, right? And we got to the hospital, and I didn't know what it was, but Carter's door was open, which is unusual. And Carter was flatlining, and they had like 7 people working on him, trying, hand pumping medicine into him to try and get him stable. And it's just interesting that in that moment, I was like praying to God. But I'm like, okay, it looks like you're fighting harder for Carter than maybe he needs to be here. And when you can surrender in that moment, right? Because that's you can let go of everything, right? I think I would still be sad if Carter had died.
Yes.
I would have been devastated. I've never lost a child. But I do think that it just does change your perspective on how you process life when you can not be attached to outcomes and surrender to the situation. Doesn't mean you're not doing your best. Like we had Carter at the best hospital getting the best treatment.
Sure.
I think, what did she say? Pray,
but move your feet.
Move your feet. Yeah. I love that. I got to start. That's going to be one of my new things I'm going to adopt, because like for real, like that's how life works. Like before Carter got cancer, I used to have to really motivate myself to make my calls for, lead generation. This was one of my favorite things in your book. You said people in sales think they're selling the thing they're selling, but actually they're actually in the acquisition business. The person with the empty office at the office.
Client acquisition,
Client acquisition.
Yep.
And I didn't know when I got into real estate that we were in the client acquisition business.
Yep.
Yeah, it took me a long time to figure that out. But before I found my passion, I used to not make my calls consistently, and I didn't ask for the business, and I didn't ask for the close, and I had a different demeanor about me, you know? And I think that when we find our passion, that it changes everything. No one has to motivate me to make my calls or to get that next deal or whatever, because it's all inside me now.
Yeah, it's you can find that energy. My mom said, my mom was telling me that every job that she did, it didn't matter how low level the job was, that she would put everything into it.
Oh, wow.
And
that's good, right?
That's great. And you know what's crazy? And I kind of feel bad about it. I had to discover that lesson for myself, like, again, it's for like 40 years, 35 years later. And then, when I discovered that lesson for myself, then I was like, my mom said that to me like 35 years ago. Not once, like, if I remember it, she probably said it to me 500 times. And I was just like, but this is I'm picking up trash in my dad's parking lot. How does it change me or make me a better person if I pick every single little one up versus, I get 90%'s pretty good, right? And that 90%'s pretty good follows you in the same way that I'm going to put everything I can into this job. And I paid no attention to it. I was like totally dismissed until it made sense after the fact. And then I went back and remembered, like, wow, my mom said that.
Your mom knows.
Mom knows.
Mom knows
best.
Yeah, and you know what? People know if you're giving 100%.
Yes, they do. It's a different energy. So you can tap into that. One interesting way to tap into that is it's the I am, right? I used to say that I'm a terrible procrastinator, and here's the thing. Think about the thing that you love to do the most. And then tell me, what it is. Do you procrastinate that, right? So let's just say, like, I'm probably going to play, like, one of my new crazy things is ping pong, so I'm probably going to play ping pong later today. Am I going to procrastinate that? Now, something important might come up and I might not be able to get there, and that has happened before for sure, but I'm not at home like, I don't have anything else to do and I've got ping pong waiting for me, so, maybe I'll watch some television or maybe I'll sort some papers that don't really need to be sorted. I'm like, no, I'm out the door, right? And so if you, and I always use the thing that we procrastinate the least to tap into that energy. And then you just say, okay, so here's another one, another sort of practical piece to it is getting rid of the have to. Like, I have to. Yes,
that's in the book.
Yes, right, because you really don't have to do anything. And so what if you say, well, I've chosen this. So I've chosen this job as regional director, and I love it. I enjoy it. I don't procrastinate it. Maybe there's one or two things about it that aren't my favorite, right? So maybe there's like some paper pushing aspect to it that's not my favorite, and I could say, well, I have to do this, right? Or how about my daughter says, hey, will you pick me up at the bus stop today? And I say, I can't today because I have to go to this meeting. What lesson are you teaching, right? The truth is, if it were an emergency, I could go pick her up at the bus stop.
Yeah.
So with the minor paperwork pushing thing, right? So what I've done is I have chosen this job and this career and this profession. I've chosen this, and I've chosen it because I love it and I have a passion for it. And there's a few things that I don't enjoy so much. I've chosen that too, because it came as a package deal, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that I have to, push some papers around. It's like, hey, I love what I do, and this is part of it. So let's get this done. And again, it's funny. Sometimes you need an outside person to tell you. One of my best friends at a law firm, and he used to say, I just can't do this anymore. I just can't. And he has an amazing practice. It's a practice that most lawyers would want to have. He's an entertainment lawyer, and he loves his clients, and he loves his work. And they don't bill by the hour; they're on a percentage basis, and they have it's just like so much. Yeah. He's a named partner in the firm. He wouldn't trade this position for anything. And yet, 2 or 3 times during the day, he's like, "You've got to be kidding me! Like, I just can't do this anymore." And one example of it was, one of his great clients that he does all this amazing work for. This is how I know about it, because he's in New York. Moves to LA and uses our real estate network to lease a high-end place that maybe at some point they'll buy. And there's a dog next door barking. So this A-list Hollywood client picks up the phone, calls my A-list
Realtor.
No, my A-list lawyer, right?
Attorney. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
no, it's her lawyer, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, hey, you know, you leased me this house, there's a dog barking next door. And he's like, are you kidding me? You know, I'm now a dog bark, lawyer, I just can't do this anymore. And then, he kind of laughs it off, calls me, right? And then I'm his dog bite lawyer or dog barking lawyer. But he then called, somebody, well, the wife of the senior partner was working with a mindset coach, and they loved this person, and he added all this value, and he actually sat with my friend for like half a day and heard him say, I can't do this anymore, twice. And he said, let me ask you, like, do you like what you do? He's like, oh, I love it. And he said, okay, well, a few questions later said, I noticed you say I can't do this anymore. And he's like, yeah, I just sort of joking about that. And when I'm a little frustrated, and he's like, here's the thing. If you said it 2 times the half a day I spent with you, you might have said it several hundred times throughout the course of your career here. And one day you're going to wake up and you actually will not be able to do this anymore.
Yeah, right?
You will not be able to do it. So using and choosing the words that help you along. There's certain, I wish I would, in 2 seconds we could come up with a different mantra for that one little piece of work that he finds menial, like this is part of the bigger picture, you think of something funnier and snappier than that, but you just replace, right? I can't do this anymore with this is part of the bigger picture. And that's, you all can find better words than that for it. But I would take that, replace, and,
self-talk is important.
Yeah, so I can give you, and again, it's sort of more of the practical stuff, and that is be easy with yourself.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, be easy with yourself. So when I have these great big goals, and I'm going to take yours, okay, for sure. So one of the things I love, I believe it unearths possibility when you put that intention out there. And you're like, I'm going to have Ryan Seacrest or someone better on my podcast. That just for me, it went from heavy to light. Here's why it's heavy. Having Ryan Seacrest on the podcast would be phenomenal. Knowing how busy he is, and he'd have to have I'm going to have my network's permission. Sorry, my network. It's like the billion obstacles, right? Now I'm all in the obstacles, right? And it's natural to do that. It's not a bad thing, right? As soon as you add to it or someone better, it just takes all that weight off of it, right? So one of the things that I do is when I teach mindset in my wealth building class is I'll say, well, tell me what your goal is. What's your sales goal for 2 years from now? And I always use 2 years because 2 years is the same thing as asking about now. If you say 5 years, people throw this crazy goal out there maybe, but 2 years is really what they want to achieve now. And I say, well, what could stand in your what could stand in your way? What things do you think could stand in your way? And they might have a short list, right? So let's say you were a $140,000 GCI person, and you're like, well, in 2 years I'd like to be at 200. Okay, great. Yeah. I always say, add a zero. Now it's 2 million. Now I say, what could stand in your way now? And it's like, the list just goes crazy. So here's a tool. A useful tool is when you have a goal. If you just put with ease next to it, so I will achieve $2 million in net income with ease. It takes all the heaviness out. So if we're at 2 million in income, that's our goal. You go 20 million. The first thing is well, I'll never be able to pick my daughter up at the bus stop. I'll never, all these things that's what's standing in our way. So I just say 20 million with ease, and then that gets my brain searching for the right things.
The easy way.
What's interesting, and I'm really glad you said that too, is that I do distinguish easy and ease, so that sometimes it might include trudging up a very steep hill, and that might not be easy. However, if you know that getting up that big hill is going to lead to all these amazing things, and then you can find the path that's easier, and you can find a mindset that helps you along, that when you get to the top of the hill you can say, I made this with ease. You might still not say it was easy.
Yeah, and I like that differentiation.
Yeah. So with these is one of them. One of the things, the other thing you asked me, because I know I want to give a couple more concrete blocks. I know we're running out of time, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You said, what's a great place to get started?
Yes.
And then we talked about mindset, which I could talk about for hours.
But I think mindset's the most important
really
piece.
is. It
If you
really
don't have
is.
the right mindset, you're never going to get started. You're not ever going to take the action.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
No, I've loved our conversation so far.
So very concrete steps that if you do not have an IRA or a tax deferred savings plan, I would start there.
Start there.
And the only place that I invest really is in real estate. So that's a step in the other direction. I want to make that clear. And I can tell you all about that, but we'll save that for another time. But even if your income just meets your bills, so you have very, very, very little to save. You can go down to Fidelity or Schwab or one of the low-cost brokers. You open up the plan. It's for free. And if you just put $50 a week into that tax deferred savings plan, even if the $50 a week doesn't amount to much, which it does over time, but even if it doesn't amount to much, just the act of doing it and having that mindset will change everything.
Discipline.
Yes. And then the other thing is, I would start with owning your own home if you don't own your own home. And sometimes people will say to me, like, well, I live in Los Angeles, it's so expensive here, so I'm gonna go invest in Detroit where I heard it's less expensive. I'm like, no, don't do it.
I think that's
Yeah.
I agree with you. What you said in your book, you said no, invest where you know.
Yeah. And so I was already investing in real estate because I was living in Pittsburgh where it's sort of lower cost. And then I went to work in Washington, D.C., which was higher cost. And I wanted to live in a nice part of town. I could not afford to buy a home. My income would not pay the mortgage. However, I had a little bit of money saved up. When you're an owner-occupied, right? You get better rates, you get lower down payment, you have all these opportunities. And what I did was I bought really a wonderful house that I could not afford, but I took roommates. And so I had three, so I had 3 roommates, and then I ended up actually paying less money out of pocket while I was paying off a mortgage.
Yeah,
and,
brilliant.
And there's a tax benefit of paying a mortgage and no tax benefit of renting. And I had renters that were paying the principal and interest down.
That's a great way to get started.
While it appreciated, right? So, so those are the 2 things that I would say to do as a starting point for sure.
Okay.
And then it would not be a shameless plug for me to say to find a realtor as amazing as you. And I know this is not the purpose it's not the greater purpose of this podcast. And I will tell you that I couldn't imagine somebody doing a better job representing their clients in the way that you handle everything.
Oh, you're so sweet, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can cut that piece out and use it for your testimonial.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
No, you really
right?
should. Yeah, I mean, and I don't say that, unless I really mean it.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I really do care. What's so funny is when we pulled up, this lady who had already interviewed 4 people.
Yes.
And she wasn't going to even call me because she decided she already was going to pick one of them. And she said a voice came to her, she should interview me. And she just texted me that, would you like to be my realtor?
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
And that's because when you line everything up, and this is where intention and where mindset and all these things come together. When you line all of that up, people really can tell. They really can. And if you have a heart of contribution, it doesn't mean, by the way, if somebody said to you like, oh, well, I want you to give me a discount on the commission, you might say, I'm sorry, I don't do that. Right? I put my heart and soul into what I do, and I don't discount my... I don't, if you want somebody that's going to discount their commission, I'll refer you to the best people I know that might do that, but I'm not one of those people. So it doesn't mean you need to undervalue yourself. In fact, it's the opposite. And you say, and when you come with that energy of, I really put my clients first, I really take care of my people, they can just feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can feel your amazing energy, and I promise you, whatever your intention was, I have learned as much today. Let me put it this way. I hope that you and the folks that watch this learn as much from me as I've learned from you.
Well, thank you. I learned tons.
Yeah.
It was
likewise.
great. And then this is my last question, because my friend said that I should have the same question for everyone so people get excited for the question.
Yeah.
So what miracle have you experienced in your life? Because my podcast is called Miracles Are My Normal, because that is what I say to myself when I go to bed every night and when I wake up. Miracles are my normal, and everything's always working out for me. I say that every day, twice a day.
And I will say this to you. You said everything is
always working out for me.
Always working out for me. So there's a small chapter in the book that I wrote, taking a play on a common and very negative statement, which is the world is out to get me.
Oh yeah.
Right? And I just flipped that around and said, what if we looked at it like the world is out to help me? And I know, by the way, I believe that both are true. So that if you walk around and you say the world is out to get me, that's actually true. Just so you know, there's people out there, they're looking to knock you down, and it's yes. And also there are people out there, if you tap into that energy, if you tap into the other energy, there are people out there that are just looking to help you. So that in having that intention, right, of miracles happen every day, and the world is out to help me, or things always work out for me. I believe that it opens your mind to the possibility and the reality of miracles every day. And just like you said, you experienced a massive miracle with your son. I believe just spending time with you, that you all, your son and your husband John and your family manifested that miracle. I really do. Even to the point where you said that, at one point I thought maybe I'm fighting this harder than he's fighting this.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not what we should be doing right now. It's just that care and openness and love that brings around the miracles that will happen for us if we allow them, really.
If we allow them.
So maybe my miracle for today, I said all that stuff, but I said it because I just learned it, right? You showed me that. I'm saying it like I know it, right? That's one of the other things I do, right? It can be quite annoying if we all work together, right? It's like somebody has a great idea and then I'll just say it again. It's like that that dumb commercial where it's like the boss just that was my idea. The boss says it and he thinks it's a good idea. I do it all the time. Super annoying. And I was saying that like I knew it and like it was my idea.
Yeah, and now it is your idea.
It is my idea. Yeah, it is my idea.
It
was always my idea. You showed it to me.
Yeah, and
you
now
allowed
it is
me to
yours.
access it.
Yeah.
That's very generous, but that's my so interesting too that's the name of your podcast. And then you asked me about a miracle and what my biggest takeaway is that we manifest or we chase away whatever miracle is out there waiting for us. It's all waiting for us.
It's all waiting. The universe is abundant and it's waiting to deliver everything to us. And people think it's easier to manifest small stuff, but it's just as easy to manifest the big stuff. It's all in a belief system in our head.
Yep.
That's my opinion. Because literally, I don't know anything about podcasting, right?
I love it.
I just literally YouTubed a million people and then reached out to some of the top people and asked them for tips and said, hey, I feel inspired to do this. Would you mind helping me? And John did a bunch of research. And then I made a list. I made a list of who would I most want to have on my podcast.
Yes.
And then literally, do you know that the first 3 people all said yes?
I love it.
Right? And it's all going to work out. And I know for sure.
The fourth
say yes.
or better.
Or better, right?
We'll say yes.
So anyway, Paul, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I'm starting a book club.
Pleasure.
It was a pleasure. And I'm starting a book club.
Yeah.
And you're our first book we're reading.
Excellent. I love it.
Isn't that fun?
And you have such a great office with Keller Williams Pacific
It's
Estates.
the best.
Yeah. Fabulous. And when you do that book club, I'd love to come down. And,
will you come?
Yeah,
okay.
I will, for sure.
Look at that. We're going to have Paul join us. Anyway, it's the best office ever. It was the best decision. You know what's so funny is John is the one who decided that we should go to that office. And I'm so glad that we're different, and he knew how important it was that we go there. I didn't see it, and he saw it. And it was the best decision we ever made. We went 7 years ago.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it was good, right? Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks for your time, because I know you're super
pleasure.
busy. Thank you. I love you for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you.
We're done. I love you.
That was great.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Very inspiring.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Very inspiring.
That concludes this episode of Miracles Are My Normal. We appreciate you spending time with us. We hope you gleaned a few nuggets that will assist you on your journey towards creating your own epic life. Please share this podcast with those who would enjoy it. Leave us a review and subscribe, so when new content is available, you'll be the first to know. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to our next time together. Have a great day living in appreciation.